Welcome to Handcrafting Your Retirement with Brett Ramsey from Artisan Wealth Strategies. In this podcast, we help retirees as well as those who are considering retirement overcome generic wealth management advice that limits your future. We do this by handcrafting customized financial strategies centered on your unique lifestyle. Jump on board for this journey where we delve into strategies that can help make your money outlast you, as Brett draws from years of experience with guest experts to eliminate cookie-cutter saving strategies.
Hello and welcome to Handcrafting Your Retirement, the podcast with your host, Brett Ramsey, where we talk about what you want in retirement and how to make it happen. I'm Wendy McConnell. Hey there, Brett.
Good morning, Wendy. How are you?
I'm good. Now, I didn't get a chance to ask beforehand, but I have a feeling that you may have a story.
You know, I love a good story, and I think that stories are a way which we can really communicate well with one another. And since I'm going through something right now that I think is somewhat pertinent to this particular conversation today. So I don't know if anybody else has ever moved, but we're moving. And right now, what that means is we moved last Thursday. And so this really wonderful group of people came in and they put all of our stuff in boxes. And then they drove it over to the new place and they put all the boxes inside our house. But what they didn't do was that cool process of taking the stuff out of the boxes and putting it back where you can actually find it. So for the last 4 days, it's been this constant process between my wife and I of going, have you seen this? You know, do you know where this is? Right. And so it's all the little things that once they're in the right place, you can find them. Right. And I don't know if you're like me, but that's just, it's frustrating. Right. Because like you couldn't find a remote to something. Well, you can't work the thing without the remote. You can't run it anymore without it. So the technology is both exciting and really frustrating when this all starts to happen. And to a certain extent, our conversation today with our guest, Shari, is going to be a little bit of talking about like, how do we find things when we weren't the person that put them there to begin with? So like, we're going to talk about a concept called estate planning, but estate planning is when, to me, is a super simple definition is what happens when someone else has to start taking over a little bit of our financial affairs. And can they find everything? Do they know where everything is? Do they know where that magic junk drawer is with all the keys that open up all the stuff and can find everything? And so, you know, it's for me, this process of moving in, you know, having somebody else put the stuff in the boxes, which I'm very grateful that they did, or it would have taken us forever to move. But then you still got to find it and you got to know where to look. And so sometimes I think we overcomplicate estate planning conversations and it sounds like such a big fancy word, but it's really just a matter of putting your stuff in a place where somebody else can find it. And then when they do find it, they actually know what to do with it. They know where to, how to use it and how to work through it. So how do we have these conversations? And because another part of this story recently is my partner, Dean, is going through a little bit of this with his father-in-law. His circumstances are changed, and at least temporarily, he's had to go into an assisted living facility, and he and his wife were having to step in and figure out how to pay the bills and, you know, how to just get basic stuff done. And they couldn't find his phone. And believe it or not, now without a phone, you can't get anybody's registration account because everybody does what? Two-step verification. So they send you a text message. So without his phone, without being able to get a text message, they couldn't get any of the financial stuff set up for him. And then it turns out that his phone was an Android phone, and Dean only knows how to work an iPhone. So he comes in with this Android phone and hands it to me going, make this thing work so that I can take care of my father-in-law's financial stuff. Right. And so like we think about these things and we can make a light of it a little bit. But to me, this is kind of the conversation that I think we need to have more of, right? Which is what are some of the practical things and the steps that we go through to kind of help our family find the stuff that they need to find, understand what's important, what's not important, so that we can take care of it. So today, I've got one of our clients, Shari Ferris, is going to be joining me because to me, she's going through this conversation at what I call kind of both sides of the spectrum. She's living it in her own life, but she's also helping with her mother. And then she still has 2 kids that she's trying to help and assist through this process. So with that, I'd like to Shari just to introduce herself and give us a little bit of her background.
Hi, I'm Shari. I have a financial background. I worked in not for profit accounting for most of my career. Now I enjoy being a women's advocate and mentoring young adults financially. I also love hiking, cycling, being outside, and do it yourself home projects.
Well, we should have had you over to help us move in then, Sherry, because I need some help getting
Yeah.
organized. And I think that's a little bit of what you're going to help us with. So for you personally, what just was there something, a particular event in your life or anything that motivated you to kind of start focusing on this for yourself or maybe, with your mom? I know you've helped her as well. So maybe just tell us that story a little bit.
hmm You're really correct about being sandwiched in between the two generations. And in my case, my daughter works as a critical care nurse and comes home with many stories of patients who have done it well and some who have really struggled and haven't been prepared for end of life circumstances or even just debilitating circumstances. And so I've really enjoyed opening up that conversation with my own kids and want to kind of keep it on the table and make it part of daily life so that we normalize these discussions as life progresses. Also, when my father died, um, he died suddenly and quickly from cancer. And I think we realized how fast life can change. And fortunately, he was well prepared as far as having a will and a trust set up. But even at that, there was still a lot to attend to that I hadn't really thought about or bargained for. And in his situation, my mom had really never been part of managing the finances on a day to day basis. And so she looked to me for guidance, and I wanted to really be a support to her as well as I could and get things set up so that she could start managing the finances on her own.
Well, what I know it's some of these things are sensitive, but what are a couple of things maybe that you didn't anticipate that you ended up kind of having to deal with in that transition? I think that's some of these conversations. Like I was just dealing with Dean with like the finding of the phone. Like sometimes it's something fairly, what seems like it should be simple, but it becomes very challenging. Were there any things like that that just kind of in your memory that you were like, wow, I didn't expect that, or boy, that was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be.
Yes, it was really things that aren't complicated, but that were difficult, like passwords, trying to, get her name on accounts that had his name on them, and we don't know the password. And same thing, like you were saying, with not being able to find the phone, just simple things like where is the lockbox key? And honestly, the you gave a really helpful tool to me a while back called the family love letter. And so over time, I have been going through that with my mom, where we're going down the list of just these really practical items. Do we know where these are? Do we have a list of passwords? What bank is the lockbox at? Just really simple things that can complicate if you don't know the information where things are located.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought up that tool because that is one of the. Quite think I really one. It's a powerful story behind the family love letter, but it's that idea of telling that conversation that you would have maybe over the kitchen table with the person that you care the most about,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of walking them through, like you said, the very practical things that will have to happen. And I'm glad that you're having that conversation in both directions, right? Both with your mom and with your kids, because that's the whole point of the process. So it's warms my heart to hear that it's working, right? That people are doing the work that you need to do to make these things go smoothly. And so, and I know there was some detailed stuff. So as you started going through that, let's focus maybe first on your mom's situation. There were some updates and some changes that you needed to make to her
Mm-hmm.
circumstances. So how did you go about that process, and what are some of the steps you took there?
Well, we knew that my parents had set up a trust, And my mom knew that it probably needed to be reviewed and attended to. The attorney they had used was no longer in practice. And so I spoke with you and you referred us to an attorney that you thought would work well with my mom. And in fact, he was fantastic. So I think part of it was we knew we needed to do it, but just kind of getting it scheduled and getting it on the calendar. And so making that commitment to actually go and meeting her there. What I found was I gained a lot of empathy, maybe looking at her situation and thinking about how does it feel as an older adult to go into a meeting, with something that feels as complicated as a trust and sort of open yourself to a person that you don't know. You're revealing, your financial situation, your end of life wishes. You're talking about pretty difficult topics and things that can make us really emotionally uncomfortable, I would say. And so I had a lot of, I don't know, a lot of emotion came up during the meeting. We learned from the attorney that she had something contained in her trust that would be better removed. And I think, this also brings up grief because my dad largely was involved. He has a financial background as well. And so he was involved in setting this up. And what you're really talking about is putting a lot of trust in a person that maybe you don't know very well. And so taking this recommendation was very difficult for her because she wanted to hold on to, well, my husband put this in here for a reason. He was a smart man and he did have a tax background. And so there was some defensiveness that came up in the meeting. And the attorney did a beautiful job of saying to her, your husband was a very smart man. He did set this up really well. And if he were here now, he would change it. And that seemed to just really help to acknowledge that, yes, he did an excellent job. However, life has changed, tax laws have changed, and we want to get this set up appropriately for you in today's world. And so she was able to accept that. And, of course, I went in with the promise that I'm going to be listening and deciphering everything he's saying and asking the best questions that I know how to ask. And we can double check on our own after the meeting and then, come back at a point that we're ready to finalize this. If we have additional questions or anything we want to clarify, we'll have time to do that. But it's placing an enormous amount of trust in, personally, I felt like she placed a lot of trust in me, but also in this attorney and that we could get her through the process together.
Yeah, I know. You're using a great word there, which is trust, right? And so I think that you use another word, which I think is a word that is empathy. And I think those two words together are words that are so important in this time, right? Is that if we don't try to, empathy is not sympathy, right? Empathy is trying to feel what the other person is feeling. Right. And sometimes that's very difficult, right? Like if you've not been in that circumstance, if you've not been in a similar circumstance, it's a challenge to try to feel what someone else is feeling. Right. And so I'm using, and this may seem trivial, but as I age and my body changes, I'm starting to see things that I used to not understand. So I'm going to use this another simple story is I play cards with some gentlemen and they're about 20 years older than I am. And we play in this room that's dark at night, right? It's in the evening. It's not like some shady room, but there's not a lot of light. And I used to just get so frustrated with this one older gentleman because he's like, I can't see the cards. And I'm like, why are you here playing cards when you can't see the cards? Right. Like, and he's like, I just need more light. And when I was frustrated with him, I was at an age where I was still the one in the room that didn't need any glasses, that I could put the tip on everybody's bill when they passed me the check because I could read it. And in just the last year and a half, I can't see anything. Right. I'm blind as a fat when it comes to stuff that's like right in front of my face. I can still see road signs. I could probably tell you like stuff that's on Mars and Pluto. My distance vision is great, but all of a sudden I can't see anything else. Well, I used to not appreciate that. So I was short-tempered with him, right? I wasn't very empathetic of the circumstance he was going through. And now I realize like, oh, I'm just going to be like Bud. Just give me another 20 years and I'm going to be just like Bud. And so I think it's really hard sometimes to put ourselves in the shoes of like your mother, right? Who's experienced loss. She lost her husband, the person that she counted on, that she trusted, that knew these things, that she had all his confidence in. And now she's having to learn on her own or put her trust in someone else. Like just try to be in that spot for a second and think about how would you feel? And so when we start throwing fancy words around like estate plans and trusts, it can be very daunting for people, right? To do it. So you're hitting on the key things that we have to start these conversations and we have to work on them for a while. Like how long did it take before you had that conversation with your mom to actually getting into the attorney's office and then actually completing the work? Like, can you just walk us through like how long of a process that was for you guys?
Right. It can take longer than you think. I think the recognition that you need to attend to it comes to you, but then it's easy to put it off. Well, we'll get to that, and making it a priority is difficult. And then who should we talk to about it? And so, kind of all the details of getting to the actual appointment probably took longer than sitting down and really doing it. And so I think he gave us about a month from our initial meeting where we rescheduled, went back in and finalized things. So actually getting it accomplished, the document itself didn't take very long, but it was more maybe the emotional preparedness and the procrastination of this is important, but it's not urgent. So it's easy to put off into the future. Yeah. And I find that with my own case as well. I have an appointment coming up to do my own, and I've known it for a while that I need to do it, and I've been putting it off. And so getting that on the calendar seems to be the key.
It absolutely is the key, right? And that's why we have wonderful people in our life, in our office, like Stephanie, who's really good at sending out reminders and saying, hey, we haven't finished that yet. And it's started, but it isn't all the way through. And I think your point's a great one of just getting organized for it. Like the actual documents themselves are not necessarily that difficult if you're well prepared for creating the documents, right? If you're well prepared for the process. So that's why we have come up with some ways to help you gather the information, doing the family love letter in advance of actually sitting down with an attorney and drafting the documents so that you have a better handle on what you really need. So I think those are things that we are trying to continue to prepare ourselves for. But are there some other key factors besides just kind of the procrastination or things like that that you think are important for you personally and for other people to think about as they start to get organized in this area of their life?
Maybe being willing just to feel the emotion of your facing your own mortality. I think is part of the procrastination. And so for me, a lot of it is just being willing to go through the motions, but also that I want to leave that lasting legacy for my kids of being a good steward of my time, energy, and resources. And so talking to them about that, I don't know, as far as the practical, I'm a fairly organized because I do have a financial background. And of course, you have helped with that where, you're a great resource for me and for the kids as well. But I think just opening this conversation and continuing it, making it an ongoing conversation has been what's probably most helpful for us.
Yeah.
Sort of brainstorming, what would we want? What if this happened? What if that happened? What would our choices be? And to be able to sort of solidify those while we still have the choice.
Let's talk about some of those brainstorming things and not to get all to the super details, but what are some of the things that have come up in those conversations that are, you're like maybe thinking about like, geez, how would we do that? Or what would we want there? Like, I think that's a great conversation. We try to have that in our office as often as possible, but sometimes I get a lot of, I don't know. And so what are some of the things that you guys have just been thinking through?
Um, well, I mean, specific to end of life decisions with my daughter being a critical care nurse, what would I want if I were, not if I were unconscious, if I were unable to make decisions about medication or food or water or surgery or, and, she's very good because she experiences these daily at work. And she said a few times and come home and said, Mom, I'll never let that happen to you. So I feel very grateful to have her as an advocate and her knowledge about physical care. Some other things that I've thought about more recently are at the moment, two of my adult children are living with me. And so if something happened to me, what about my house and what would happen to them and what would their desires be, around living here? And what about, does someone want this property, like to own this property for their own, those types of questions. And so it's just interesting. I love young adults and I love exploring the way they think and what their wishes might be. And so it's just been good to kind of throw those questions out there. I think sometimes we don't have the answers immediately, but that keeping that ongoing conversation gives the opportunity for them to think and brainstorm a little bit and also to consider their own future, their own assets, for them to kind of begin the process that I'm in. Like, let's start thinking about this when you're young. What would you want? And so they can also pass that down as they become, older adults.
Yeah. And I know you had I'll kind of bridge this back to a little bit. I know you had asked some questions about your mom's circumstances as well in regards to the living, right? Like of staying in your house or on your property. And you'd mentioned, like that I think her property is fairly large and requires some upkeep and some maintenance. And I think yours does too, right? Where you've got some
Yes.
trees and things and some land. And so those are some of the practical things that you have to think about as you're aging. Like, how are we going to take care of those? So how is that, having that conversation with your mom?
Right. So my mom is experiencing more physical limitations than she has in the past, but she desires to still live in her home. And so she's an extremely hard worker and has trouble giving up the tasks. But I have encouraged her lately, if you want to be able to stay here, you're going to have to ask for help or hire some help and be willing to do that. That's why you have prepared well financially, is to have the resources to make that choice at this time. That's what it's there for. And so, I've encouraged her to save yourself physically for the things you want to do and love to do, and let someone else help you with the yard work. She has a lot of acreage, a lot of trees, lives in the woods. And so, the time has come maybe to ask for help with that. It's
Yeah.
hard to give it up, I think, when you're at that point, to let
No,
go and sort of acknowledge that, I'm not as able to do this as I used to be.
yeah. No, I mean, we're having those conversations in our own family. And that's why I think the more of these conversations we can have to help each other understand how to bridge it, right? So when
Mm-hmm.
my mother-in-law, my father-in-law passed away kind of suddenly also. It was a weird kind of freak accident that ended up ultimately taking his life. And
Mm-hmm.
um, he was very able-bodied still. He was able to do things. Well, they lived on a property that required a lot of maintenance outside. They lived on a hill. There was a lot of trees. There was a lot of external maintenance, and he was capable of doing it and enjoyed it. And then when he was gone, my mother-in-law doesn't have that same physical ability to do those things. So it was a lot of asking for help for several years and the emotional attachment to the home. And it was very hard. And there's not an easy way to have that conversation of, okay, when maybe can't we stay here any longer? When does it not make sense? Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so she was still physically capable of doing it, but literally she lived on top of a hill And I would slip and struggle on that driveway when it was wet outside. And she's not as agile or mobile as I am. And so getting up and down that driveway every day was becoming harder and harder. So there's some things like that that we have to take into consideration. But then how do we kind of organize that conversation and put it into context of not just the emotional, which you've been talking about so much, but then the financial, and then the actual, what I call legal work of that, right? So you mentioned 2 kids, right? So how do we start to divide things up and make those choices if maybe one kid wants the property, right? Or that there's a reason to keep it. We talk to a lot of families that have farms, and they're on the second or third generation of the farm. And now the only way I can say that on things like that is that asset is more valuable now than the amount of income that it's producing for the family, because properties values have risen so much. So how do we have those conversations about maybe it's not time to keep the family farm, or that property isn't want to stay in the family because none of the kids want it? And, how do we do that? So just having an open dialogue about the reality of those things that does matter. So for you personally, as you've kind of gone through this process, we've talked a lot about like trust and those kinds of things. How about confidence? Another one of our favorite words. So how has going through this process kind of helped you with your confidence and thinking about where you stand today and what you need to continue maybe working on for you and your family into the future?
It's been very helpful. So having you as a resource, having 3 kids that I know I can trust and really count on to be good financial stewards. And kind of, I think, being willing to ask for help, to know your limits on knowledge and let the experts do what they're good at has also really helped me. And so I feel confident having preparing a financial plan for myself, that I'm leaving my kids and my heirs in a good position to have what they need when I get to the end of my life.
Yeah. And I think that knowing your background, that's kind of what we all want, right? Is we want to have that well done, good and faithful servant kind
Yes.
of a mindset, that we've run our race well and that we've prepared for what's next for us, but we've left behind the things that are necessary for those that will follow after us, and that they have what they need to take care of our affairs. So I know that you're working on that in your family, and so appreciative of you being here today and sharing a little bit of your journey with us. Is there anything else that you think that our listeners here of the of the Handcrafted for Retirement podcast would need to know about this process?
No, I would just encourage you to get it started. Don't put it off. Leave the legacy that you want to leave. You have the opportunity now to give a great gift to your family, and just get the process started.
Well, I think that's a really crucial thing. Is I've really taken on a new mantra this year. That's it's called progress, not perfection, right? And so I think so often that we get stuck in a mode where we're so busy trying to be perfect at something that we just simply don't get started. And I couldn't echo a sentiment more strongly than that, which is this isn't a process that you get perfect with one pass, or that you sit down with an attorney for an hour and you got it nailed, right? But you have to get a framework and you have to have something to work through. And that's why it's a part of our annual service calendar. It's not a one-time thing that we do here at Artisan. This is an ongoing part of our relationship with our clients, is because things will change, right? Just like in moving, there's boxes that we've opened and we're like, why did we even have that? Right? We can't get rid of that, right? And then you open up all new boxes. And so, you're going to unpack a few things and you're going to pack a few things away. And that's really the part of estate planning, is helping those that come after you know where to look, where to find the stuff that they need to make sure that they help you finish your race well. So thanks for sharing those words today with us, Shari.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
So, Brett, how do people get in touch with you if they have some questions?
Well, in the immortal words of John Lovitz from Saturday Night Live, you got to get to know me. But you guys need to watch more Saturday Night Live from the 80s. It was a great time. But But from there, the way you get to know me is you come to our website and you go to, the World Wide Web, the www.artisanwealthstrategies.com. Right on there, you can find me, you can find links to myself, all my social media, and you can even request an appointment. And like I said, if I don't know you, I can't help you. I want to help you, so I want to get to know you. So give me a chance to get to know you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for listening today. Thank you for joining us. Please like, follow, and share this podcast with your friends. Until next time, I'm Wendy McConnell.
Thank you for listening to Handcrafting Your Retirement. Visit our website at www.artisanwealthstrategies.com or give us a call at 317-660-2855. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Artisan Wealth Strategies. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.
Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor. Member FINRA, SIPC.
Artisan Wealth Strategies and LPL Financial do not provide specific, individualized tax or legal advice. We suggest that you discuss your specific situation with a qualified tax or legal advisor.